I'm here today with Tomer Dotan-Dreyfus, who is a well-known novelist and writer, memoirist even, who grew up in Israel and moved to Germany. And exactly that is the subject of his latest book, Keinheimisch. How would you translate Keinheimisch?
It's a really good first question, because there is like a translation in the making, and we are debating the title. At first I thought of like some different puns, like indigenous, or
Undigenous. I like that one.
Yeah.
I
don't know. It didn't, and then I thought maybe it doesn't have to be a pun. Maybe I could just like have a sentence.
I love a good pun though.
So. The translator also had a really good pun, nomesticity, based on domesticity. But we'll see.
Okay. So what's the book about? Why did you feel the need to write it?
So the book is about the impossibility of feeling indigenous in Israel after October 7th, but that's like the sort of like the get-go. And then the twist is that all the reasons for me to doubt my indigeneity or indigenousness in this country, all these reasons were actually already there and just hidden from me long before October 7th and long before I was born.
Well, for example, what does that mean?
For example, I have very very good memories of my grandfather, and I still do, and I really loved him, and he really loved me, and we had a very good bond. And then I discover in a very old age, relatively, or I should have probably discovered it earlier, I would say, the story with him that he fought in what the Israelis call Independence War.
In 1948.
And he freed Kiryat Shmona, a city in the north. And it was rather later in life that I actually Googled Kiryat Shmona and saw it was founded in 1950. And then, you kind of start asking, so what did you actually do there? And I by the way, till this day, I don't really know what exactly he did there, but I know that this was an operation of ethnically cleansing the Galilee.
And so he was kind of a participant in the Nakba.
Yeah, not kind of. Like, he participated in Nakba. This operation that he was in happened before the 15th of May, 1948. So the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, it was in April. So it wasn't even a part of like what they, in the Israeli narrative, we declared independence and all Arab armies attacked us. And it's like, no, that's not true. The ethnic cleansing of Palestine started before they declared independence, almost a year before. So it's part of that before campaign.
And so do you think that, I think the subtitle I've seen it advertised in some places as Israeli childhood and German kind of adulthood. Is there much?
It's a marketing thing. Let's write Israel in the cover.
Yeah. Well, it is about Israel, but how much of it is about Germany? And coming onto this story about your grandfather being kind of a war criminal, right? Probably a war criminal. Does that make you feel more at home in Germany in a sense, or a bit of a mean question for your grandfather?
Yeah, I mean, I would not compare between his war crimes and the war crimes of grandparents of people here. But I think that a lot of times, when I talk about a certain feeling that I feel now as an Israeli, watching the genocide unfolding for 2 years, and the complexity of my identity and relationship to the place that I'm from, and I'm speaking about it in readings and so on to a German audience, I feel like, why am I even explaining this to you? You're supposed to be it's supposed to be very self-understood.
Which part?
For example,
the sins of the fathers, or the
genocide? Yes, like the idea that the complexity of having very strong positive feelings towards a grandparent while knowing that they did horrible things, which is something that I have to deal with now.
When did you find this out?
In my late 20s. And yeah, or for example, I was hosted by the ARD, Phoenix-Runde, it's called, and they bring some experts and some stuff to talk.
It's a panel discussion.
It's a panel discussion. And I was asked there, I'm trying to translate it to English in my head, whether it's possible to move on, quote unquote, without demanding accountability. And I said, absolutely not. And then I added, and it's live, mind you, and I added, and I don't think that I should be explaining this any further in a country like Germany. And I heard the cameraman going like, "Boah," you know. There was a very awkward silence in the lift afterwards.
Sure. Well, it is somehow surprisingly awkward at sometimes to talk about the Nazi past. I think the general conception is everyone wears it so proudly, but actually it's kind of a process of national, accepting of guilt. But in individual cases, there's a lot of denial, right? Opfer war im Widerstand is the idea.
It's just not honest. I think. I mean, there are 9 chapters in my book, and one of them is dedicated to Germany. Only one. But it's just very heavy, and everybody just want to talk about this one chapter and so on. So it sounds like it's the majority of the book, but it's not. But this chapter, I also tell the story of my other grandfather, who was a Holocaust survivor, and he had a horrific story from when the Nazis marched to Warsaw. And they threw everything they raided Jewish apartments of Jewish people and threw everything down to the Hof, to the yard, and they threw his baby brother to the yard.
Wow.
Which obviously immediately died, and his mom shouted at this moment when her son was being thrown to his death. And later on, when he was already in Israel, he was a very strong opposer to the Wiedergutmachung, to the reparation agreement with Germany. And these demonstrations of mostly of Holocaust survivors in Israel in the 50s against the agreement with Germany were, until today, or maybe until a few years ago, probably the most violent demonstrations in the history of Israel.
They stormed the Israeli parliament.
They
right?
threw rocks into the Plenarsaal, yeah.
And that was also kind of, I remember from your book, that was kind of the foundation of the Likud party as well.
The party existed for many years before. It was like the continuation of the revisionist movement in Zionism, but it was on the fringe, still on the right-wing fringe. And then, because it was led by this guy Begin, who later was Israel's was later Israel's prime minister, and he was also opposing the agreement. And through this very strong stance that he had, he managed to get a lot of Holocaust survivors into the party, and that's when this party became rather big and popular. Not big enough for a regime change, but big enough to be an actual threat, and 20 years later to take over government.
Oh, right. So it still took 20 years after that. Well, I mean, there weren't that many Holocaust survivors in Israel, were there? And
there were quite a lot. I mean, compared to the general population, which was very small as well.
At that point, yes, that's true. And how were they treated? Because this is something which is quite big in the German narrative. Israel is the Schutzraum for Juden. It's like a land founded by Holocaust survivors in a very, glorifying way. Of course, anyone who knows anything about trauma of what they went through would say, oh God, that's going to be somewhere that's committing a lot of crimes, or it's going to be a very troubled nation, right?
Yeah. I mean, first of all, their trauma was used in the Nakba, knowingly or unknowingly. I honestly, I don't think that the heads of the Palmach, of the Jewish militias in Palestine, thought, right, we're gonna use their trauma and put them. But they came to the land before 48, in 47, in 46, and they just immediately joined because of their age or because of their, they just immediately joined the troops. And you have a lot of, I quote, for example, there's a documentary called Tantura about the ethnic cleansing of Tantura, which is very close to where my parents live in Israel today. But it was a Palestinian village on the coast. And one of the interviewees, who is a soldier that took part in the horrors that happened there, he says, of course they did awful things. Some of these people came from the camps, from Auschwitz.
Yeah.
I'm not sure about the exact wording, but that's the essence of what he said.
I've seen it.
And that just tells you everything that you need to know about how they were used. And later, they were a problem in the first years of the state of Israel, because Zionism was trying to create a new kind of a Jew, a very strong, active, masculine and muscular type of Jew. And Holocaust survivors, with their passiveness, alleged passiveness, because how could they go like sheep to the slaughterhouse, and so on and so forth?
That's the famous phrase.
Awful metaphor. They embodied the exact opposite of that. So they were treated rather badly. They were called soaps, by Jewish Israelis that were born in Palestine.
So Holocaust survivors, when they got to Israel, were called by Israelis soaps because they had been made into
Among
soap,
other
basically.
things, they were treated like an interference in the project that we're trying to build of a different kind of a Jew.
Wow.
And that went on until the Eichmann process, the Eichmann trial in the early 60s, where the state of Israel realized that the testimonies, the stories of these people can actually be used to justify the existence of Israel.
Wow.
And so they made the Eichmann trial into this kind of a show trial, not only for that reason. To be fair, to be honest, it was really
about justice.
No, it was a genuine interest in this trial among all Israelis. But during this trial, and as Holocaust survivors were telling their stories which many Israelis heard for the first time, then came the realization that we can do something with that. We can work with that. And since then, it's been almost the opposite. It's been almost fetishized, Holocaust stories. You have teenagers going to Poland that are, as part of their trip to ghettos and concentration camps, ex-concentration camps, they have to kind of reenact, the persecution of Jews, hide under the stairs and stuff like that.
Wow.
There's a nice film called Defamation from 2013, I think, or earlier a little bit, where this Yoav Shamir, the Israeli filmmaker, is following a group of Israeli teenagers on their trip to Poland, and you can see that how they need to act as if they are the Jews during the Holocaust.
I mean, that's great for propaganda purposes, right?
Yeah.
It must be. Did you ever have to do anything like that? What was
I didn't. Thank God.
What was your childhood in Israel like when it came to these topics? Not just the Holocaust, of course, you have it in your family, but also the Nakba, also Europe. Your roots of as Europeans. Some of you, in your case,
the roots are completely silenced. There is no. There is sort of a very shallow overview of Jews in Europe between the two world wars when you learn history in school. But it's not like I grew up not knowing the native language of my grandparents, which is Yiddish, not knowing anything about them, about their history. Not to mention Jews that are not Ashkenazi, that don't come from Europe, from North Africa, etc., that really know absolutely nothing about the heritage.
Well, people don't call them Arab Jews anymore, do they? I think that's one of the but actually many of them, of course,
a lot of them also don't call themselves that.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of, even if you try to adopt their own definition of that,
which is
it's difficult because they do have different, groups. But yeah, Mizrahi Jews is colloquial would be.
But I wonder, do you think we're actually losing a possible, solution or idea by calling them Arab Jews to remember like where they came from, their culture? A lot of them did speak Arabic. Some of them still do, right? And I'm really interested, coming back to this idea of indigeneity. It's an idea I'm quite critical of, to be honest, the way that I see it used in a lot of activism, especially, in Europe, using the term BIPOC, for example, Black Indigenous people of color. I'm like, what does indigenous mean in a European context, right? Most of us weren't, in Western Europe, we weren't colonized, we were colonizers. So does that mean that I'm indigenous as like an Irish person, or are Irish people indigenous because they colonized? I'm
Ireland.
Also British, right? So, but then am I indigenous to Britain? Because that makes it sound a bit right-wing, a bit fascist, nativist. So in general, I actually don't like this idea.
Well, the thing is this, white indigenousness sounds always a bit fascist and nativist because of what white people do with their indigenousness.
But not all of them, right?
But not all of them.
What about Irish people? What about Polish people?
Sure.
They were both colonized multiple times. Are they indigenous?
I'll tell you what I'm doing, the twist, the theoretical twist I'm doing in my book, even though that's a spoiler.
Still buy the book, people.
Please. No, what I'm doing is I'm detaching the term indigenous from an actual geographic or heritage at a geographic place, and I connect it to ideology and relationship to the place, which means in the context of Israel-Palestine, which is the context that I'm writing about, that might piss off some people in the Palestine solidarity movement. I'm sorry. What I'm saying is that Zionists are not indigenous in this land. Jews can be if they want to. First of all, culturally, we are, because this land does appear in holy texts, in ancient texts, in poetry from medieval time, from Spain. People write about Palestine and so on. So it's not
in the regular prayers. There's prayers about returning to Jerusalem.
Exactly. Right? Jews pray towards Jerusalem since forever. Like it's not. It is not out of the blue migration like any other migration. To be fair, which doesn't give them the right to do whatever they did, but it's not. I'm saying Jews can be indigenous if we drop or manage to give up on ideologies that inherently clash with indigenousness when it comes to how you treat the land, how you treat the people of the land, how you treat nature, how you treat languages, etc., which is Zionism.
But okay, I have a controversial question in that case.
Yeah.
Do you not think that supremacy is maybe part of the Jewish religion, of that, not Zionism necessarily, but what was, or do you think that can be separated from Judaism? Because, a lot of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible, is the story of, returning or going to this land that was promised to them, and fighting with people and cleansing it and, dominating it. So isn't that like part of the narrative spiritually?
It is, maybe. The Bible is a very violent text. It's a very beautiful text, but also very violent. And I'm not suggesting to go back and do what the Israelites, or the Hebrews, they were called back then, did in the land of Canaan when they arrived there from the Exodus. But
who knows what actually happened, right?
And yeah, it's also not a history book.
Yes. some erstwhile biblical scholar,
Yeah.
I can actually confirm the Bible is not real.
Yeah, it's not real.
Especially the Hebrew Bible. It's very mythological.
Yeah. But the fact that this is part of our myths and the stories that we tell ourselves as Jews doesn't mean that it has to be part of our future, especially if that brings upon a complete destruction or unsafety or such volumes of violence. I think this is, I think it is possible to live in this land as indigenous if we manage to give up on those, not on those myths, but on the application of those myths in our understanding of the land and of the world today.
And that's one of the reasons why I mentioned Arab Jews a minute ago, because there were Jews, indigenous Palestinian Jews, right? They spoke Arabic, they were, and then, they gradually aligned themselves more with the settler movement. Of course, there were probably many people who were Jews and converted to Islam, or, if you look at the kind of DNA of the people there, the Palestinians are very closely related to the original inhabitants. So many of them, may have descended from Jews who stayed in the Roman period, who gradually adapted and through waves of migration. Who knows, right? And that's why I'm interested in this claim of indigeneity. Do you need to be indigenous to have a right to live somewhere? We're pro-migration, aren't we?
I think you don't have to be indigenous to have the right, but I think if I am redefining what indigenous means to a new definition that could also include migrants, that could also include refugees, that can include basically anybody who is willing to take upon the indigenousness of a certain land, then I think it's a on the one hand it's just a terminological shift, but I am very much pushing for that shift in the book, because that's like what I think that we need to get rid of is not a certain people or a certain ethnicity in a specific place, or it's an ideology. It's a colonial ideology. It's a settler ideology, and the ideology can be we can get rid of this ideology without getting rid of the people.
I guess that's a long-term project. Right now, it does not look like Zionism is under threat in Israel, right?
No, and it's not under threat here, and it's not. But sometimes historical shifts happen very slowly, and sometimes they happen very quickly.
Yeah, or they start off slowly and then all at once, right? Who knows what's going to happen there? But what's happening here?
What's happening here?
You said Zionism's not under threat here. Now, a friend of mine, actually a very old friend of mine, who was the person I first went to Israel with when I was 18, 19, they recently went to an event by Na'amod, which are kind of anti-Zionist Jewish community in the UK, quite religious or culturally very Jewish, and they had a Sukkot festival, which is what I believe the disgraced former governor of New York called those damn tree houses. And actually they're trying to rearrange and recodify Judaism so it's less about this connection to the land. And they're changing some of the festivals to do that, about this connection to foreign land, and make it more about living in the diaspora. Do you think that any of this message would be, or is there anyone in Germany doing this? Is there anything filtering down to the Jewish community here?
Yes, I think there is. We are Jews living in the diaspora, and most Jews in Germany speak German or English in their daily life. Some speak Hebrew, but it's not, and a lot reject it, as in they present or they perform some kind of a form of Zionism, of looking at Israel and Israelis as the place to be, or the place where we're safe, and not only that's objectively not true,
right?
It kind of hinders them from seeing how beautiful diasporic Judaism can be if they will embrace it, and how necessary it is that we also fight antisemitism here, and not only when it happens elsewhere. For example, or how beautiful Yiddish literature can be that was written in this part of the world by Jews, etc., etc. I am very much for diasporic Judaism. At the same time, I think that trying to detach Judaism from the land is not necessarily what I would go for. What I'm going for in the book is saying Judaism is connected with the land, but I want to detach that from nationalism and colonialism. And like the fact that we have a connection to this land doesn't mean that we have to be supremacists in this land nowadays. But also these are things that can coexist, right? Judaism there and Judaism here, and Judaism in Palestine can also be diasporic. If
What does that mean?
It means that Jews in Palestine don't consider themselves sovereign. They consider themselves part of a cultural, lingual autonomy that is not sovereign in this territory. Like I am here.
Yes.
Or like whoever, Namod in the UK. And yeah, so in that regard, in that sense, I'm for diasporic Judaism as a political mode of cultural identity existence. Yeah.
And how do you feel that's being reflected in Germany at the moment? I mean, we've talked on this podcast before about sort of the tokenization of Jews in Germany. Like, ultimately, the community here is quite dispersed, right?
What is the community here?
Well, that's what I'm asking
That's the
you.
question. Like, what is the I have the what is the
There seems to be institutions. There seems to be Israelis who come here. There seems to be, the establishment. Then there's many, but the vast majority, as I understand it, are ex-Soviet Jews. The Kontingentflüchtlingen, they were called, who fled the Soviet Union in the 90s. About 1 million came, and some of them were Jews.
And you have a very, very loud group of people who grew up German, Christian, or atheist or whatever, and converted.
And they're part of the Jewish community.
And they're German part of the Jewish community, which I would think is, I don't determine the rules. And in Judaism, one is allowed to convert into Judaism. You're only not allowed to leave, but you're allowed to convert. If I was to make the rules in the 20th century or 21st century, I would say Germans shouldn't be allowed to do that, because you also shift from being part of the perpetrators, the people of the perpetrators, to the victims, which is kind of strange.
It's swapping sides.
How does one even feel comfortable doing that? I don't know. Like, imagine I would just go around presenting myself as a Palestinian. Like, that would not be accepted very well, wouldn't it? But they somehow get away with it.
Although some people, I know that some activists, Israeli-born activists, have applied for Palestinian passports and stuff like that. So,
all right,
yeah, but they're out of solidarity. So you could say, but I don't think they were granted that.
I believe you talked in this podcast before about the anti-Deutsche.
Sure.
Right. So your listeners, or
but they know the pro-Israel left. Basically.
Yeah, they know what this is about. So I'm trying not to be to the Palestinians what the anti-Deutsche are to us, So,
i.e., people who were
going to learn Arabic and cook only Palestinian dishes and look for Palestinians on dating apps, etc., etc.
You're trying not to fetishize.
I am trying not to fetishize them, and that includes also not, in quote unquote, converting to their identity, especially when I belong to the people that are committing the genocide with them right now. And so,
So coming back to this German...
So coming back to the German Jewish complex, I think one of the problems in Germany is that you have like one Jewish community that is getting the authority of the state to represent Jews everywhere in Germany.
And that's the
Zentralrat,
which is Central Council.
The Central Council of Jews. Name, but okay. And because even if you try to kind of compete with it and have some kind of a progressive community for progressive Jews, they are traditionally very conservative, or not traditionally. Today they're very conservative. They were progressive in the past. But if you try to compete with that, you don't get recognition from the state as a community, and that is not the case in other countries in the West. There's
no recognized plurality of Judaism.
Exactly, and this comes from the German need to have things organized and to know exactly who is representing Jews, so we can talk to this person on matters that are, by the way, not necessarily always Jewish, but we do need a Jewish stamp on.
Yes, well, I think we'll talk more about that in a minute, because I've heard some rumors about this. But it reminds me of a conversation I had on Twitter with Volker Beck, who is one of the most famous kind of pro-Israel extremists, you could say, maybe. And I said, why does Germany have to support Israel? What about XYZ? This was years ago. And he said, well, das würde mit dem Zentralrat abgemacht. We've signed the contract with the Zentralrat. We support Israel. That's sorted. Like there's no discussion.
But this is the
These
problem.
are their official Jews. This is our foreign policy. Done.
Look, what I'm in this chapter on Germany in my book, I talk about their concept of Wiedergutmachung as a process that has a beginning and an end, and this is a very Christian thing. The idea of redemption.
Yes.
Like if you do A, B, C, you will be redeemed, And you have a lot of people today actually talking about it as if they have absolviert, as if they graduated from the program of Wiedergutmachung and now they are good and they can do whatever they want.
Yeah. I think famously Ulf Poschardt, who's a very influential publisher as part of Axel Springer, he quite recently said, that I'm so happy that the Jews forgave us. Germans.
Yeah, exactly.
Have they?
I didn't.
I don't think my Jewish friends back home did either.
And I definitely
boycott Germany.
Yeah, and I definitely didn't forgive Ulf Poschardt to the extent that he can call me an anti-Semite on Twitter.
Wow.
I didn't do.
Did he do that?
He did it. He erased it, but I have a screenshot.
Damn.
And not just me, other Jews also were on that list. But it's not only this, this kosher stamp of the Central Council of Jews. It's not even on matters of Israel and Jewishness. The former government of Olaf Scholz, they promised to erase the word race from the German constitution, from the Grundgesetz.
Yeah.
And that's just one tiny example, right?
I remember this, exactly.
And then they didn't. And in order to be able to do that without this coming across as something like as like a breach of elections promise and so on and so forth, they went to the Central Council and asked them, the Central Council of Jews, like, what if that's okay if they don't remove the word race from the constitution? And they said yes, because who's giving the budget to whom,
right?
And they said yes.
They're not independent of the state, are
right?
They?
So not at all. So the headlines the next day were not, the government decided to not erase the word race, but rather the Zentralrat approves, double point, the word race will not be erased from the constitution. So now they basically put on the Zentralrat, and via that they put on Jews all the inconvenient policies that they want to do. And we see that also now when they want to use and abuse Jewish fear for far right and right wing politics against migrants, against people of color, against demonstrations that go against the state or against the AfD or I don't know what. they just do it. They just use us for that. And
so are you saying that Germany is getting the Jews to do its Drecksarbeit? It's dirty work, a phrase that Friedrich Merz used about Israel against Iran recently.
I think that's probably what he subconsciously might have meant. Yeah, obviously he meant like Iran, and if Israel wouldn't do it, we would have to do it, and so on. Which is like, what beef do you have with Iran?
Yeah,
but okay,
there is an obsession with Iran in the German elite, right?
Is it? I don't know. I just know that like in the 90s, it was like a thing that people after or before university studies, they would go on a bicycle tour to Iran or something. It was like a trend. But anyway,
I think somehow, at least Axel Springer, like Matthias Döpfner recently said that Iran is the greatest threat to the West. I'm like, bro, have you heard of Russia? You know, like, I don't think, I mean, you know, not going to say anything positive about the Iranian regime, of course.
No, it's a terrible regime. And I understand when people say like, I don't, these are not my values. But I also get the ick when far-right leaders like Friedrich Merz start talking about our Western values, because I don't share values with him either. You know, not to the same extent.
Well,
but still,
I'm sure he would say he's a Christian Democrat, not far right. But
right, I'm sure.
No, but but specifically, what values do you not share with Friedrich Merz, right? Because he's the German state and government is doing a lot of stuff in your name. You're a Jew in Germany. Your protection is paramount. That's why they send the troops in to beat up people on the streets.
Yeah, to beat up me. So, I think...
Is it a defensive, a corrective beating? I mean...
Look, this is part of that exact German need to have things organized and in order. And
contractually.
Part of that is prescribing certain ideologies to certain identities, right? And this is maybe the clearest example of that is the idea that Jews must be also Zionists. So if a Jew is not a Zionist, then they don't deserve the state protection or even the recognition as a Jew that others get from Germany, right? So a policeman in Berlin can beat up a Jewish demonstrator all the way to a hospital, you know, because this Jew is not supporting the state of Israel.
And they're breaking the German law, probably.
Are they?
No, good. I take that back.
There
is no law when it comes to this stuff.
There is no law. I mean, there are a lot of things that
the police officer would say they were, not following orders or
there are a lot of
insulting
things,
them.
Yeah, that most people don't follow these kind of cases much further into the future. But if you would, then you would see how the police loses one case after another in court.
True.
2, 3, 4 months after something happens, when it's far away from the light of the Axel Springer cameras and reporters, they lose in courts. So
that's true, especially in cases relating to From the River to the Sea, which they treat as illegal, but then in most cases, and they treat it as a slogan of Hamas. But it's, anyone who's done any research knows it's nothing. It's very little to do with Hamas.
And the police drags people to court in a frequency and an amount of times that if I would do it or you would do it, we would be accused of abusing the court.
Yeah.
Of using the court for intimidation. That's what we would, and this is also not legal in Germany.
And do you know what else? Axel Springer reporters have complained that the courts are not convicting enough people, and they say the courts are too soft, So they're actually agitating against the system of justice.
Yeah, which is not surprising, because when you agitate against the system of international justice, I mean, when judges in the International Court of Justice are being threatened and their bank accounts are blocked all over the EU, and
ICC,
so on and so forth.
International Criminal Court, I believe.
And no, also the ICJ. Karim Khan is suffering sanctions, etc., etc. So both. So obviously, it's gonna also come back home eventually. And you can't tell people that the court is biased. Don't regard the court if it's against Israel, and then expect them to respect a German court.
I mean, that's true. I said recently on the T, where I was interviewed, that for the German elite, and I want to hear your reaction to this, for the German elite, the Staatsräson is the new Führerprinzip, the new Führer principle, because it's not about following the law. It's not about just, we support Israel because it's recognized by the UN and we have to have law and order here in Germany. I think it's something goes beyond that. It's this obedience.
It's not the law. There's not... I had a conversation with my dad. He was here recently, and every time he's here, he's kind of confronted with the fact that the Deutsche Bahn is actually quite late very often. And then he did this joke that, I don't understand how could they do the Holocaust if their trains are so not on time.
Wow.
Back then, it's not like back then. It's, Israelis do Holocaust jokes.
Yes, there's a lot of gallows humor.
It's not really a thing for us.
Yeah.
And then I told him, oh no, he said, I thought Germans are accurate because of, how they did it back then. And I said, well, Germans are not accurate. This is not... The trains were on time in Auschwitz, not because Germans are accurate, not because they're well planned, but because they wanted it. It's the motivation that made them. And now they don't really care if the workers of the Deutsche Bahn.
I'm sure there were other factors at play as well, right? Like,
of course.
We actually don't know if the trains were on time at Auschwitz. Well, I don't know that. I think it didn't matter because people were locked in there, for days.
Sure. Yeah.
But I know. Obviously,
the idea was, it's not about the law and order. It's about what I want right now.
It's about priorities, and priorities is like supporting power. Quite often.
And then it gets the justification of order very often because this is how they explain things to themselves. But it's actually not order. It's disorder.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting thing, right? If you ask a German, if you show a German footage of the police beating people, right? Because I do that a lot, at least digitally speaking, of the police attacking protesters. What's your reaction going to be? Is it going to be, obviously the protesters did something wrong, they broke a law, they were not supposed to be there? Or is the disorder, is the German black-clad police charging into demonstrators, is that disorder? We saw it recently, not just at the Palestine, but also in Gießen, an anti-AfD protest. There was people were blocking a motorway, disordered in a sense, but then they were just charged into and aggressively beaten. So for me, that's also disorder.
Yeah, but also, like, if you have the AfD is a good example because the AfD is a party that wants to change the order. They're called by the other parties or other parties call themselves the democratic parties, as to imply that the AfD is non-democratic party, and they're probably right on that. Like, the AfD probably do want to dismantle democratic institutions, and so why is that party part of the German order? Why are they not being perceived as disorder? But Palestine demonstrations are.
Yeah.
Why are Nazis...
Why do they have Meinungsfreiheit? Yeah. Why do they have freedom of opinion in the AfD?
Exactly.
And pro-Palestine Jews like yourself don't.
Yeah. And neo-Nazi marches in Friedrichshain, for example, they look very orderly because the police decides that this is going to look orderly. And it's not going to look as chaotic as the Palestine demonstrations. So basically people, on the ground, the police on the ground can decide whether something is going to look orderly or not. And so this whole order-disorder thing is kind of made up. In that sense, yeah, I think you're right about the Staatsräson.
Yeah. I want to come back to something that you said about 10 minutes ago, maybe a bit more, about German Jews, or rather Germans converting to Judaism. So you've expressed a little bit of kind of, you feel a bit uncomfortable about it. And I speak, I'm not German. I speak to people about my work, and this is something that comes up about Germany sometimes. And often, like very normie Brits, foreigners, you say, oh, they're German, they converted to Judaism. There's like a yikes that comes out immediately, right? Like, whoa, like that's a taboo almost, that's shocking. non-Jewish people I'm talking about, who might not even know that Germans could convert or whatever.
Right.
What's the response if you would get if you were going to criticize like German converts to Judaism? Is that like, do people understand like, oh, it's kind of a bit icky?
No,
Or-
I mean, look, it is legal in Judaism, and so they can do it.
But you're not religious,
and
right?
I'm not religious, but I'm like, but this is also not just a religion thing. Like, Judaism is also cultural, and but I my problem is not, and there are people converting for many different reasons. Like, people convert for partners.
Yeah.
People convert, for.
Well, if your
whatever.
Dad was Jewish, then to be recognized, you have to convert, right?
Or genuine interest in this culture and in this religion and so on, fine.
Yeah, I think that's a bit weird, honestly.
My problem is with people who convert and then immediately go, what we have experienced. What did you experience exactly? And there is another breed, which is people who are not Jewish but are in high positions, in the Jewish world,
like museum directors, for example.
Who would strike that. I won't go into that.
Okay.
Yeah, but the Wilkomiłskis. Yeah.
Right. So ultimately, I feel like what I remember, I read a story a few years ago about a cantor who was, I think, the first female cantor of the major synagogue in Berlin, and she was complaining effectively about how the majority of the congregation, I believe, were converts, and often in many German, synagogue congregations, a lot of people would come in, like it would be majority German converts. And also then they would start reorganizing things. They would say, let's do it this way. Or even the rabbis would be converts who grew up with no experience of Judaism.
Yeah. I actually wrote a text about it back then in 2021, answering her, and sort of agreeing with her, but not completely. Like, I also saw...
She was fired, right?
She was fired, and I also saw in how, in what she was saying, a bit of things used to be better back in the day,
right?
Kind of a regular nostalgia that anybody could have about anything. That said, it is true that converting to Judaism without genuine interest, or without the ability to listen, which a lot of Germans lack. They want to talk. They want to do things their way. They're not... I'm generalizing, okay, but for the sake of the argument, sometimes you have to. They're not often open to the idea that other people do things in different ways. And when a lot of people, when a critical mass of people like that enters a community, it changes things, and maybe
makes it more conservative.
It makes it more conservative. In some cases, it makes it, more. I have this claim in the book that Zionism is Christian.
Well, it was written in German, right? Der Judenstaat.
No, but not only. It's a movement that starts in Judaism but breaks out of it and tells other people, you can join us. You don't have to be Jewish. You don't have to do all the Jewish stuff. You don't have to, cut your penis or foreskin, or eat kosher, or not do anything on Shabbat. You can do whatever you want. You can eat pork. You just need to believe in this one principle, in this one guy, in this one state, and then you're with us. And that's the break of Zionism outside of Judaism, to the point that the majority of Zionists today are not Jewish. And then the next step, or at least that was the next step in Christianity, was to develop a certain hatred towards the Jews that stayed back, that didn't come with on this journey. And I think we're starting to see that now, or not even starting. We see it in the last few years. And so when a critical mass of people like that join a Jewish community, in a way, they even Christianize it.
Well, of course. I mean, if the majority of the congregation and sometimes even the rabbis are of Christian backgrounds, born and raised, of course they're going to bring in Christian aspects, right? Subconsciously, perhaps. And you could also argue that isn't Reform Judaism or liberal Judaism, especially, a Christianized form of Judaism?
You could. I mean, I think part of not understanding that is also a very Christian approach to religion, to perceive it as like a product in a supermarket. I can just go and not buy this cornflakes anymore, but I'm going to buy this cornflakes from now on.
And
this is the relationship, but it's not. Judaism perceives itself as a religion differently than Christianity perceives itself. If I don't go to the synagogue at all, I'm still Jewish. Christians who don't do anything that is Christian will say I'm not a Christian, right?
It's not something you're born into. There's different. Some Catholics might say I'm, baptized Catholic, and that's all you need. You need the baptism, right? But and then you're in. Whereas Protestants would say all you have to do is have a relationship, accept Jesus Christ as your savior, right? So religion's a very interesting topic. That's why I spent 5 years studying it. But I do think that, the religious aspect of this conflict is sometimes exaggerated in the Middle East. Even antisemitism. Antisemitism, it's not about the religion, is it? It's not about, oh, you weirdos, you have your Sabbath on the Saturday and rather than the Sunday. It's about something else. It's racism, effectively, I think. Happy to hear your thoughts. It's a type of racism. How does anti-Semitism work in the modern world in Germany, where we talk about it constantly? And of course, I have to say, we're recording this episode just after a horrific attack on the Jewish community in Sydney, where my brother actually even has ties. So it's obviously a real thing.
Of course it's a real thing, and I'm not, so I'll start with saying that I think anti-Semitism, a lot of people say that it's not a type of racism because it has its own characteristics. Well, it's important to say that every racism towards every different group has different characteristics.
Yeah. Although that's, I think, a specifically very German idea that it's not a form of racism. I've never heard that outside of that. But maybe
I'm just more curious. For me, it's more interesting to ask, why do you feel the need to say that this is a different type of hatred? Like, is it not so that you can fight one of them without feeling obligated to fight the other? Because it's two different things. Like, why can't we just fight both of them together? And if we can, then where does this need come from to say this is not racism, this is something else?
But maybe we can't fight them together. I'm playing devil's advocate a bit here right now, because for some people, Jews are the right race, because many Jews are white, right? Looking down the street, I don't know. Would I think you were not a white person? I might just think you're Italian, right?
Okay, but is this sure? But
so it's not visible. Whereas, someone who's, of course, there's other forms, right? Some Latinos are white.
But not. A lot of Jews are not white in terms of.
But then they would be facing racism if you would. I mean, didn't that happen in the US? Someone shot two Israelis because he thought they were Palestinians.
Yeah.
So, that was actually anti-Palestinian racism.
It's true.
Against Jews somehow, because a lot of Jews in Israel are very dark. They look like Arabs, when you're there, or Persians or whatever.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, definitely. I think that there's also, when it comes to anti-Semitism, there is sort of an obsession with defining it in a way that we can handle it and eradicate it, which I appreciate as like a tendency that someone wants to eradicate anti-Semitism.
Sure.
I think,
and all forms of racism.
I think it's as realistic as like eradicate violence, or any form of violence. Like, it's just, I think it's just forever going to be part of human society. But I also think that a lot of actors in this game of trying to define antisemitism are acting in bad faith. And so the whole conversation about antisemitism has become anti-Semitic.
What do you mean by that?
I mean, that, for example, people would equate anti-Semitism with anti-Zionism without even understanding that that would mean that they're equating the state of Israel with Jews, which is an anti-Semitic thing to do. Even according to the conservative definitions of anti-Semitism, it's an anti-Semitic thing to do.
Is it, or is the conservative definition like you can't equate the crimes of Israel with Jews? Because I feel like in, the IHRA, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance, it's kind of having its cake and eat it. It's like you can associate the positives, but it just says the crimes, right? And this line, which you just used, associating Israel with Jews as anti-Semitic, I see it used all the time, and it never has. Of course, but it never has any effect. On
There was a time when I decided to troll Rias, and I just reported.
They're the people who measure anti-Semitism in Germany.
And I reported all of those stuff of equating anti-Zionism with anti-Semitism as anti-Semitic incidents. Obviously, it wasn't being registered. My filled-in forms went into the void, and I just stopped doing that. But yeah, it happens all the time. And not only that, one of the gravest anti-Semitic rhetorical things you can do in Germany is Holocaust Relativierung, right? Relativizing the Holocaust. If you're in favor of Israel and Israel's crimes, you can do that. That's not Holocaust relativization. You can say that Hamas are the new Nazis. You can say that the 7th of October was a little Holocaust. You can say all kinds of stuff that are completely relativization of the Holocaust, and this won't be perceived as such. So that's why I think the debate about anti-Semitism in Germany is firstly not honest, and that's basically all that one needs to know in order to have a stance about it. Like, I would like to have a debate.
If you say Gaza is a Holocaust, you're in a lot of trouble, basically.
You are, and it's also not. But also, the 7th of October was not a Holocaust. And a lot of things like that one side is allowed to do, the other side is not allowed to do. And I'm not even trying to imply symmetry here.
Sure, because the symmetry would be one side is very powerful, right?
Exactly.
The Zionist side is very powerful.
And it's important to mention when I say things that sound like both sides are symmetrical, that they are not. I'm just saying that in front of the German law, there should be some universality and consistency.
I mean, it's not even law. I don't think relativizing the Holocaust is legal. It's just, although it has been treated as legal, and sometimes they win and sometimes they don't, right? But of course, there was famously a case of Thomas, an older German Jewish man who's involved with Jüdische Stimme, and he said, what the Germans did in the gas chambers is like what the Israelis are doing in Gaza at the help points. They get them there, they shoot them. So it was a comparison, right? And he was arrested, I believe prosecuted. I don't know where that prosecution stands at the moment. So we are also talking about matters of law here.
Yeah, definitely. We're just not equal. And this is in itself obviously an anti-Semitic thing to say Jews, which we already talked about, but like Jews are we have good ones and bad ones, and you're allowed to do this, you're not allowed to do that.
The German state, I think, is the one defining that as well.
That's the problem, Judaism or Jewish people had an inner political debate since forever, and it was very rich and very radical at times, and we were doing fine with that, The toxicity of the inner Jewish debate in Germany happens because the German state interferes in it, and because the German state rewards one side of the debate over the other, and that's what creates this. And
I take it you see yourself as on one side and on the side that doesn't get the prestigious jobs or funding?
I don't think I'm going to be nominated for a prize again in Germany, to be honest. I think people are afraid of what I might say on stage.
Mm.
And they're probably right. So,
Well, I mean, ultimately, isn't that the job of a writer to be a teller of uncomfortable truths?
It is, but in Germany, such a huge part of the culture is ruled by the state in terms of budgets and so on, in opposed to other countries.
So I actually call it a Scheinzivilgesellschaft, which is like an apparent or pretend civil society.
Yeah, in a way it is.
There's like a lot of fun. Everyone talked about how great Berlin was for all the arts funding and the literature funding, and and they do put a lot of money in, but it's you have to toe the line.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I say about Keinheimisch, about my book, that to discover suddenly that it was always the case. Now that they suddenly cut everybody off, that is a little bit critical of Israel, you realize that it was always the case that you only got funded because you were unproblematic. And that kind of, it makes also the perception of Berlin that before that a little bit tainted. My memories from Berlin 2010, 2011 are a little bit tainted when I think about how thriving the art scene was and the culture scene was, and I think, oh, that's because they weren't critical of this or of that. It's because they didn't really threaten the state, or because the state didn't really feel threatened by them. That's why.
Yeah, I mean, I've had a discussion recently with an artist friend, and they said, "Oh, Berlin, it used to be so liberal." And was it liberal or was it hedonistic? I mean, you talk about 2010, 2011. Like Berlin was known as this sort of hub and attracted a lot of people, but I always wonder where the great work coming out of Berlin is, actually, because I don't see that much compared to London or compared to other places. I think it's a great place to live. I think there are great people here. It's very interesting, but so much of the kind of, I meet people and they're like, oh, well, I've got like 300 grand for an art project because this actually happened the other day. And it's like, oh, because it's like regulated that when you build a building, you have to spend a public building, you have to spend X amount on art. Like, and they won the Ausschreibung, the application. So there was a lot of money around, but is there actually a legacy of this kind of Gaza Berlin's amazingness?
Well, there was a legacy that they're really trying hard to dismantle and destroy, I think. I mean,
Is this why you write in German as well?
I write in German because I write to a German audience. And I'm trying to think about like the previous question about the
legacy.
What remains of Berlin. So
I feel like it was maybe a mean question because I'm not an artist and I'm a bit of a Philistine about some visual arts. So.
No, but the thing is that there is a lot of money going around, but also, all right, I'll say it like this. The liberal Berlin that we saw for many years was also part of Germany's public diplomacy, soft power kind of projection. They wanted Berlin to be liberal so that people worldwide would think, oh, Germany is this and that. It's Berghain, it's this. And as soon as Germany was not interested in pursuing this line of soft power anymore, it all shut down. And that just it just shows to me how naive I was in thinking that the art scene and the culture scene in Berlin is really free. It was never free. It was constructed, it was designed, and in a way it was used. Yeah. I mean, I was in a jury for something recently some literature thing that people from all over the world apply, and they get a residence in Germany, right? And we had a lot of applications, and none of which was from any Arab-speaking country. And at first I was asking, like, is this a mistake? Like, this can't be. And then somebody from this Stiftung said, no, we actually didn't get any applications from the Arab-speaking world. And I think, people start to see that. People start to perceive Berlin and Germany's illusion of freedom and art and culture as something that is a state project rather than really free. And they don't want to have part in this, especially not when the same state project, the same state is bombing their relatives or finances the bombing of their relatives. They don't want to take part in it.
I mean, Germany's soft power has definitely taken a dent, I think, although I saw like a headline recently that Germany's the most popular country in the world. So
where did you see it in the Bild?
No, it was someone talking about a BBC headline, so I didn't quite fact check.
Look, I also came to Germany thinking that this is a liberal paradise. Okay, and these are the things that I thought about Germany before coming here and in the first years of being here. So the amount of money that they spent on convincing people worldwide that Germany is this and that, it worked. It worked, and it's still working on a lot of people. I thought that this is a different Germany, that the past is in the past and so on and so forth. And I was shocked to realize how much they knew about all the Nazi criminals going around South America, like their locations and so on, how much they were in touch with the German embassies there and nothing was done about it.
Or just how little the Nazi criminals in Germany were actually prosecuted.
Actually prosecuted. And people are saying, oh, come on, leave her alone. She's 100 years old. Yeah, it means that she lived 100 years without paying without being held accountable for. And, or for example, the first 6 or 7 heads of the Bundeswehr were trained in the Wehrmacht. Former Nazis were in the judicial system here. They were in politics, in the CDU, in they were everywhere.
The FDP especially was almost a pressure group for ex-Nazis at a certain point.
They were everywhere, and of course they were. Like, when I think about it now, I think, like, are you stupid, Tomer of 2010? Of course they were everywhere, because, like, a Nazi doesn't just stop being a Nazi because they lost the war.
I mean, it was a totalitarian regime. Like, a lot of people were Nazis and a lot of people were part of the state. They never really... the ultimate issue is they never really did a proper denazification, right? I mean,
no, they didn't. They stopped it in 1951.
And, the state the BRD only founded in, like, 48, right? So, or 47. And, your great uncle, I suppose, who was thrown out of a window in Warsaw, the butcher of Warsaw, who oversaw the campaign to destroy Warsaw and the Jewish ghetto and all of that, went on to become a mayor of Sylt, of a town on Sylt.
Yeah. And you still had places where Hitler is the honorary citizen. In 2018, they didn't cancel it yet. Like, in 2018. So, sure, it's another Germany, but only because they're forced to be.
Because they lost.
And and that is a very bleak and dark realization.
And, I'm hoping that this is, I'm starting to write a book, and this is kind of what that book's about. So in the meantime, I highly recommend Keinheimisch, Tomer Dotan-Dreyfus. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.